everyone. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays with Ashe Counseling. You guys come on in. I see people are starting to join. Come on in and this is what we do every Monday. This is our summer series where we're talking about different mental health topics. And today I'm so excited to bring Andrea Velasco Echeverri. She is a licensed therapist and also a licensed art therapist. And she was talking about how to integrate art therapy and what that is like if you ever decided that you wanted to do art therapy. And also, we're going to be talking about mindfulness. So let's just get started. You want to just tell them a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. So my name is Andrea Velasco Echeverri, and I'm a bilingual therapist. Like you said, I also a registered art therapist. That's my background. That's something that I am very proud of and use as much as I can within the scope of our practice now. And we are being as creative as we can with the virtual world. I am Colombian. I immigrated to the United States about 20 years ago, went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my master's in art therapy. And I use that in our practice as I can.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Now, you are in California right now, right?
I am, yes. Yes,
How
definitely.
how's the weather there? You see, I'm all bundled up because it's cold here.
Yeah, it's 70 degrees and sunny and barely any clouds. So I can't complain. I'm visiting family and it feels great.
Good, good. So let's get started. So how did you get into art therapy?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to make a difference in the world. And initially, it was through creative lenses because as an immigrant, I struggled to communicate. I didn't know English when I came here, so I felt misunderstood many times. And although family wise, I thought I had to be a doctor or an engineer, I realized creative lenses were the way that I really was able to best communicate. And being at the University of Central Florida, and I was at kind of like in the counseling office. One of the counselors just asked me like, "What is it that you want to do?" And I said, "I want to help with creativity, but I can't find anything." And so she shared that our therapy existed, and I was like, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" And so I did my own research and fell in love and understood exactly not only that I've been an artist my whole life and creativity has been a great way of communicating, but that I could do that too in a therapeutic place with others. So that really was what kind of got me started.
Yeah, what would you say to, maybe people who are interested in art
Mhm.
therapy but do not have any art background or do, maybe
Mhm.
that they're not creative enough to do art?
Mhm. Well, as art therapists, we always say you don't have to be an artist. It's not like we're judging in any way any of the art making. Art
Mhm.
therapy is about the process and it's about how you use materials and it's about your healing experience. So, what we do is use creative processes, especially visual arts, and process whatever it is that your goals are, right? So if you're coming into session, the last thing we're doing is critiquing your art. What we're doing is focusing on using materials, whether that you're interested in or that you're familiar with, and use them in the ways that we therapeutically think appropriate or that you choose that are appropriate to yourself, in order to explore what you're trying to explore emotionally. So sometimes people say, for example, "I'm not going to draw." And you're like, "Okay, then let's do some collage. Or sometimes it's just about using a lump of clay and throwing it to the floor and then shaping something. So we are trained in understanding materials. So that's one difference from an art teacher to an art therapist, is
Mhm.
the fact that we're not only therapists, but we also understand our materials in ways that we can gear treatment because of those.
Okay. Yeah. And so how have you been able to incorporate it in this digital space?
Well, it's been a challenge for sure, but as creative beings, we've been able to do what clients have been comfortable with. So a lot of times it's about found objects in their homes or settings where they had to go to or stay quarantined on.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was iPads and digital media. Sometimes it was just thinking creatively and kind of drawing things in our heads together within the sessions, right? So imagining what a setting could look like, ideally, if that's what they wanted to work on, or how feelings could look and or be shaped, right? And so if somebody is feeling overwhelmed but they can't name it, then we imagine, okay, what color would that be? What texture would that be? What shape would that be? And that gets people kind of thinking and exploring farther, not only creatively, but really giving language to feelings and other things.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from people who may have been apprehensive about art therapy and then took the chance to explore it?
Well, I think people usually who are very excited have had some positive experience with our materials, and people who are hesitant typically have not had good experience or stopped using them since elementary school. And so I think the feedback is often, wow, I didn't realize I could do this. Or, instinctively, my cognitive functioning was like, I am going to do this image in my head. And when it came to like drawing it or painting it, it felt very conflicting. But at the end, in our conversation in therapy, is about a safe space, discussing those challenges, discussing the discrepancies between what we think, how we feel, how we externalize those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
how does art therapy and mindfulness come together?
Certainly. I think so. Mindfulness is kind of just training yourself to have this or having the intention of having awareness and being in the moment, right? And the R materials are very helpful in that way because not only are they physical, right? You can hold them, imagine, smell them, but you can also close your eyes and still create something. And so, for example, if you have a piece of clay and you shape it, but you are not looking at it, right? And maybe you're just smelling and shaping. That can also be mindfulness, bringing it to the moment, allowing yourself to just focus on that clay and not on anything else, letting your thoughts and everything else maybe like having some awareness about it, but not being judgmental of yourself, right? And so by bringing yourself to this moment, even with breaths, and then kind of using that rhythm of the breaths into the coloring or the shaping of the clay or the drawing on the iPad, it is about synchronizing your moment, that minute, that second that you're breathing in with these creative tools that you have at your reach.
That's so fascinating to me, because it is sort of meditative. I could imagine. I know that like coloring books have became very popular,
Hmm.
in the last few years because of the experience. And what, as a therapist, as you were talking, what made me think about is like grounding techniques, like
Hmm.
using something like the physical touch and the senses, like if you are experiencing some anxiety to be
Absolutely.
able to kind of bring.
Hmm. Certainly. And it's something that I actually do talk to my clients often about whether we use our materials or not, right? Is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like just 5 things you can see, 4 things you can maybe hear. I usually leave it open so that they could choose because there might be rooms where you can't see much, but you can hear a lot, right? There might be rooms if you're in a baker where you could smell a lot of different things. So usually
Mhm.
I just focus on the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, depending on where you're at. But with our therapy, you could do the same thing and you could draw things and you could name things and you could, visualize things. So one of my main ways that I emphasize the artist's mind is that we are creative, so we don't have to be rigid, we just have to be creative in the moment and use our senses. And like you said, especially for grounding, I think that sometimes meditations can feel threatening to people, like I'm not going to do that, I can't do that, I can't get myself to do that, right? Especially people who are very busy or easily distracted or just having a hard time with sitting still. But if you have a coloring book, like you said, or a material or a texture they could just hold on to, then the attention now comes in, and then you begin to be, or being, at least allowing yourself to be more mindful and grounding.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions for Andrea, please post them in the comments. I just noticed that our some things are a little off as far as like the count. So if you guys got questions or comments, we welcome any feedback that you may have as we're talking here. Um, do you do any? And I think so. And you mentioned like with art therapy that there's no judgment. You know, this is not
Mhm.
a class. Your technique, but do you do any interpretation through
Mhm.
art therapy? Because, and I guess I'm thinking more like I know with kids, like
Mhm.
you know, you could tell a lot about their state and what they draw. Is it
Mhm.
the same with adults?
Well, we actually don't interpret drawings, right? We consider that the client is the expert, not only of their life, but also in their artwork. And so what we talk about is what it means to them, right? Because somebody who may draw sunshine might not be saying life is good. They might be saying I'm cold, right? So it's more about what they feel and understanding the materials. Like for example, when it comes to people with severe trauma or sexual trauma, right? Sometimes we're hyper aware in terms of the level or the sensitivity to certain materials like wet clay or other things that could be just re-traumatizing. So we are very mindful on not only the level and exposure of the person's, you know, to just understanding of their boundaries, but also of their comfort with the materials. So that's why, I can make assumptions. I ask, or I, prompt based on what I know about, like the more liquid materials, the more dry materials, the more rigid materials, right? Versus someone who may have struggles with rigidity, and then we do some flowing watercolors, right? And therefore working on the skills that they want to work on based on our understanding of the materials, but also on their flexibility, on their desire, on their willingness to want to, use any of these materials. So I believe in a client-centered kind of approach, and therefore I consider myself more of a flashlight, right, in therapy, and a teammate, and not the person who's the expert. So as much as I understand materials, I also always want to make sure that the client is leading into what they prefer, or feel most comfortable trying, and is the same when it comes to their artwork.
Hmm. Do you also do art along, like, you know, I know when we're back in person, whenever that happens,
Mhm.
but in a typical situation, do you do art along with them or do you just help facilitate what the person is working on?
So it varies, and it depends on the person and what we're working on, right? So I have various examples. Like if it's someone who feels already worried and anxious of being judged, then I create a space where we're both working on something different, right? I don't want to be looking at them while they're already struggling with that kind of sensation of being looked down upon or judged.
Mhm.
But we can create a space where maybe I start working on, as them, and have them work on my stuff and kind of exchange. So then there is a work in between the two about that rigidity, or about being judged, or about this collective work that facilitates that kind of reduction of that anxiety.
Mhm.
So it varies, it depends on them.
So it depends on them. Okay, that's good to
Hmm.
know because I can imagine I would feel like, okay, the teacher's watching me. You know, if I do the wrong thing, you know, because
Hmm.
clients oftentimes do edit themselves and censor themselves
Hmm.
as they're getting comfortable with the therapist because they don't want to say the wrong thing or they don't want to, you know, they want the therapist to like them and all that kind of stuff. So I can imagine especially the people who struggle with like perfectionism, you know, that
Hmm.
idea that you're watching them as they work. So that's really comforting to hear that
Hmm.
you judge that on the client's needs.
Hmm. And sometimes I'm not there because we talk about considerations or goals for the week. So then instead of journaling, I encourage, okay, can you draw a self-portrait of where you feel like you're at this time? And
Oh,
in that way, we can talk about it in session afterwards. And so when they're judging themselves, then we can kind of work on that reframing and understanding and self-empathy. So even if we're not working, I think a lot of clients do judge themselves, and humans, we all do too, based on what our expectations are, or someone else places on ourselves. So I definitely work not only in session with making art, but also on developing that creative lens. And so I always say, it doesn't matter if it's a stick figure, it doesn't matter if you're collaging, it doesn't matter, how you want to externalize these feelings or this image or this self-portrait, because we're just going to talk about it in terms of how you feel and what it was like to even say, no, Andrea, I couldn't do that. It was too much. And that's okay.
yeah. Yeah. So let's switch it up a little bit, because
Mhm.
I could talk about this. It's so fascinating. So I could talk about this all the time. Tell me, you wanted to also talk about like mindfulness. Tell me, why is that important to you?
Well, I think mindfulness, just like art, right, is this specific process in which just we I believe we belong in this world, right? Not by ourselves. There are so many other things going on, and we're easily distracted or avoiding or doing so many things to kind of just get through the day, right? And so mindfulness kind of begins to allow to ground yourself and be in the moment more than like other techniques I've tried, in addition to our therapy. So it's just something that truly has combined very well with my art therapy practice and also being a creative being. Like, it's one of the places where I feel like is more challenging to be non-judgmental, because you want to reach this point of calmness or meditation that you hear or may be told about. But in the moment that you start paying attention to even eating gum, right? Like, if you take out a piece of gum and eat it, that could feel like a 5-second thing. But if you were to describe it in a mindful way, it becomes almost like 100 steps of things that you do, right? From like the first time you look at it, the first time you're going to reach for it, the first time you're going to, touch the material, open up, just
Mhm.
smelling it, seeing it, touching it, then putting it closer to your mouth, the smell getting stronger, right? Like, so it's a way to really bring awareness to our thought process, to understand how we think, to understand how we can reframe some of those thoughts, right? And I always share with clients that thoughts and feelings are human. A lot of them want to change or not feel that way or not think that way. And so what I believe is that with mindfulness, we can increase that awareness to understand our patterns of thinking, our patterns of looking at ourselves, or what is going on in our lives, or how we feel about those thoughts,
Mhm.
and make a change how we respond. And that's where I feel that empowerment is so important. It's just feeling empowered to make a change in that moment on how to respond to the feelings, how to respond to the thoughts. And I think with mindfulness and our making, that's where the magic happens for me.
And I was just reading something, because especially here in Chicago, our summers go really quickly.
Mhm.
And we're already at my mom. I was talking to my mom yesterday. She was like, "Summer's over," and I'm like, "No, don't say that." But the weather that we've been having, you kind of feel that way. And
Mhm.
because it is over so quickly, the article that I was reading is about incorporating mindfulness even when we're not feeling distressed, even when we're
Mhm.
pretty good and pretty, happy about things, and
Mhm.
to be able to savor that time, because it does feel like, and then there's theories about what Einstein said about time, but
Mhm.
when we are enjoying ourselves, it seems to go really quickly, and to use
Mhm.
mindfulness in that moment. What's your
Mhm.
thought on that?
I love that. I absolutely believe in it. I we are told this all the time, right? Seize the day, do
Mhm.
things, that you really are passionate about, but it's hard. It's very challenging on our routines. But I do, um, often encourage not only my clients, but family, friends, like just close your eyes, take a deep breath, or maybe 10 breaths, and remind yourself you're alive, you're here right now. And maybe the next meal is going to be the next thing that you feel super excited about. Or, if you're enjoying something, like, for example, my sister-in-law went to Ireland a couple of years back, and I remember telling her, like, just close your eyes, breathe, and nobody could take that breath away from you, right? And that's something that I do when I go hiking, or spend time looking at a painting, is just capture that moment that maybe my phone will be able to capture, but that feeling, that sensation, that moment of all my senses being focused on that 1 second, it's very powerful.
Yeah, it's so important. And you see that, when people, I think about like these Oscar winners and, when these wonderful
Mhm.
things happen to people, and I want to say, breathe, 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 savor this moment. I mean, there's video and all of that, but to be able to, these moments are so fleeting, and mindfulness, and also incorporating gratitude in that,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
explodes the feeling.
Hmm. Well, exactly. And I think that, typically in my process, in the therapeutic process of a lot of my clients, what we look at is, let's bring awareness. Just the fact that we're here, we can bring awareness. This is something we're working on. And then trying to use that thought changing, or, just being able to understand that you have the ability to respond to this feeling and this thought specifically, if that awareness is there. And then the gratitude, because with that gratitude expanding, then a lot of things do get reduced, like in terms of symptoms. So I actually do use that often in that sequence, in terms of the therapeutic process, integrating art or just being creative.
Yeah, have you been able to do that through telehealth? And if so, how has that been working, or how do you implement this with someone that you're seeing, on a screen, and they're seeing you on a screen?
Hmm. Well, I think telehealth, as challenging as it can be, it's a creative medium itself, right? Like the way it just gives insight into our environments and what it looks like and what it feels like. It's a whole um, different game to what therapies I think we were used to. And at the same time, it definitely has allowed for, grounding to look like, a person is in their home and they could ground on the same chair that
Mhm.
I'm talking to them about. So it's not longer you're in my office and this is silence, there's only silence around.
Mhm.
Now I could see your home and it's maybe chaotic, and I could hear the buzz or the train or the babies or
Mhm.
whatever else. So I understand that it's more challenging, but we can practice and still become mindful in that moment, right? So I can practice it in session with people. We can talk about, okay, let's try this specific exercise and see how it goes. I often have clients, journal about their experience, because my goal is for them to say, this is working, this is not working, and so we can work together on what we can try next. So I think in that way we've been able to do grounding and also practice that mindfulness and art making and just being creative, really, throughout this telehealth big shift.
Yeah. Are you finding, do you get any resistance from people who might say they don't have the patience to do that?
Hmm. Certainly, I just like people that say I haven't, I haven't used a color pencil since first grade, and or I'm not here to color, or that's for children, or it's the same I think for mindfulness. Like, no, people who come with other diagnoses from before, like I have ADHD and it's impossible for me, or I have other type of diagnosis or experiences with it, right? So again, I am not one to impose, this is the technique we have to work on. It's more, if they don't want to, I always say it's here, it's a tool, and what we're building here, I'm not a magician. We don't have, the magic wand that's going to take things away. What I have is some tools that we can try and see if you can build your own toolbox with all these tools. And so that's what I focus on, is just kind of saying, hey, if you brew with me, we can try it. If that's okay, we just do the 4, 5, 6. It doesn't have to be a long meditation, 15 minutes or 20. It could just be 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And if that's okay, then that works. If it doesn't and it's very uncomfortable, then let's try something else.
Yeah. Do you practice this in your own life? Like, do you do meditation and mindfulness?
Absolutely. I am very aware of what sitting in front of a screen can do to my body. So I definitely make sure that I am taking care of myself. And I do that with mindfulness, with meditating, with stretching, with yoga, with art making when I can and I'm able to. And or sometimes is just a snippet of a song and or just a sip of water. But yes, definitely I try to, first of all, for my clients, because I see them, sometimes back to back, I have a 10-minute break in which I always not only end the session, but also refocus on the session that's coming in to make sure that I'm ready to hold that space for the next person. So kind of honoring that therapeutic relationship, I feel like is very key for me to practice what I preach, or kind of do what I encourage my clients to do, just like my mentors and professors always taught.
Yeah, it's so important. I can even feel myself, when life gets busy and I don't do the things that I know. For a little while, we were doing some remodeling. We didn't have a kitchen and we were just eating out and we were trying to make healthy choices, but not all the time. And I could feel like the physical, like what I was putting in my body was not good. And I felt pretty bad. And, I
Mhm,
just tell. And it's the same thing with using meditation and cultivating that practice. That if I'm not doing that consistently, and I'm not,
mhm,
I can't say I practice what I preach all the time, because it is a practice. It is something
mhm,
that it takes years and years and years to develop. And sometimes we're good, sometimes we're not that. We're not
mhm.
hitting that mark. So it's a practice, but if you're in there consistently, I know that for me personally, I can feel the difference when I am
Mhm.
in and when I'm out.
And absolutely, and I think that because it's a practice, I always also say be kind to yourself. It's okay if you don't do it, right? I try to be kind to myself
Mhm.
because we're doing all other things. As therapists ourselves, we're holding space for so many people, right? And that's already such a hard job. So for us to be hard on ourselves in that degree, I think it's not even helpful for ourselves or anyone around us or our clients, right? So definitely, I do think that yes, it is important, but it shouldn't be um, punishing, right? It shouldn't feel like when it comes to self-care, it's something that feels good. It might just be going to the window and breathing the air. If that air doesn't smell good, then that's not the one that you want to be doing, right? You want to just go back to, that chocolate cookie or whatever else that really
Mhm.
feels good to you.
Yeah.
In terms of the smell, or if there's something else. I also, some of my clients do yoga and I tell them, yoga classes are going to be great, but if you can, then a stretch is just a 5 second stretch, right? Just bringing that breath into your lungs, taking a step, and then continuing. So it doesn't have to be in depth, right? Like very long or very elaborate.
Yeah, I think that's also so important because then people think that they have to do these like 2 hour meditations and go on all these retreats and read all of these books and do all of the things. And those things are fine as you build up to that, if that's the direction that you're going. But keeping it simple. And on the flip side, when I recommend meditation to clients, they're like, oh, that's all. What is that going to do for me? But it's so simple, but it is effective.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, what it does to your body in terms of not only reducing the speed, right? Your heart rate, or just how it oxygenates, or just the different physiological, more technical terms of the things that it does to your nervous system. I think it is very, I mean, the research is there, right? The evidence is there. And I know that science not always, I mean, it keeps on evolving and it may say something now and it changes later, but I personally have felt it, right? When I just take a deep breath, I'm like, okay, you know, at least I know I'm breathing, right? And then, okay, I'm eating, I'm hydrating. Okay. You know, people who are people of faith, right? They do a prayer, and it's no difference in terms of
Mhm.
just taking the moment. It might be 5 minute prayer, it might be an hour rosary, right? It's
Mhm.
whatever feels good to you.
Yeah, and like even like with like the rosary, because you are touching the beads, and that's part of
Mhm,
grounding. I mean, it's very
mhm,
similar to like the Buddhist practice with the
mhm,
beads. And so that's so fascinating. I don't want to get controversial with people's faith, but it's,
mhm,
a lot of times we have a lot more things in common than we
mhm,
do not. And so meditation, if you think about it, it's incorporated in all faiths. If people,
mhm,
because that sometimes I do get that sort of, well, it's not a, I've had someone say that it's against their religion. I was like, okay,
mhm,
well, how does your religion interpret the silence, being in the silence? And so,
mhm,
yeah, we work through that. Yeah.
mhm,
Any last, we're coming up, we're a little bit over our time. Any last,
mhm.
parting words for our people, our audience out here watching?
You know,
Any-
I want people to think about using materials that are creative, whether it's art, visual art materials, or dancing, or just listening to songs or instruments, and just take a moment for yourself. Just breathe, try to ground yourself. If anything, write it out. It might not be something that is ideal because you might be busy, but if you're in the train, or if you're, busy in any other settings, just, you have a phone, you can type things in. You have pen and paper you may have access to. You may just make a mental note, but really, grounding doesn't take that much. Mindfulness doesn't take that much. Art making doesn't take that much. So just carve out the time. You can do
Yeah.
this.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. This was so informative. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. I'm going to
Thank
end the
you for
broadcast.
having me.
Thank you guys. You
Yeah,
can.
this was so exciting. Thank you.
Andrea is taking new clients. So if you are interested in working with her, please visit our website and you can schedule an appointment. Thank you guys.